The road to the shrine was lined with bonfires once the sun had set. Their light gleamed off the heaps of snow, brilliantly illuminating the area. And yet the stage was still dark. A screen hung from the shrine's eaves.
まだかな。
そろそろだろ。
Naoto reassured the impatient Ayato. Kensei and Saya kept racing back and forth behind the screen, busy as bees. Naoto and his group had gathered by the edge of the stage. Hitagata's leaders, such as Yoshimitsu and Hideyomi, all sat together near the front of the stage.
お前たちは向こうにいなくてもいいのか？
Kensei nudged Ayato and Karen as he pointed out their relatives. Kensei? I think you got your names mixed up. I don't think Kensei nudged Ayato and Karen.
別に構わないと言われてるの。
大人たちの集まりだしね。まあ親父もこっちに帰ってきてないけど。
Oh, what, is your dad busy laying pipe right now or something? Satsuki stood right next to Ayato. She was studying a tiny hair clip she cradled in her hands when Ayato had probably bought her, if Naoto had to guess.
さっちゃんもいいのかい？
Sadie.
ええ。
Satsuki looked up at Naoto and shook her head.
それでどんな踊りなの？
Megari turned to you and asked.
私もおばあちゃんから聞いただけだからよくは知らないけど。
ミコが踊ると聞いているけど。
Karen glanced at Satsuki out of the corner of her eye.
向こうで準備しているんでしょ。
You answered like she didn't care about the topic in the slightest.
おう、こんなところにいたのか。
親父？
Yuzuru dropped by at that exact moment.
おじさんは向こうじゃないの？
Ayato gestured to the chairs at the foot of the stage.
俺はもうとっくの昔にひな神から離れているからね。今はただの一村人だよ。
黒谷が一村人ね。
The Kuroyas were, in fact, the third most powerful clan in the village after the Hinagamis and the Shigasas. However, that meant virtually nothing, seeing how they never had any opportunities to actually exhibit that authority.
こんな小さな村の中で権力を振るったところで。
Indeed. Hardly anyone cared about who was the literal king of this hill.
おや、さつきさんもここにいるのかい？
It appeared Yuzuru was also keen to Satsuki's presence.
ええ。何か問題でもありましたか？
そういうわけではないが。
Yuzuru surveyed the area.
まあ、俺には関係ないか。
Not my problem. He's just like, but aren't you, you know what? Fuck it. Not my problem anyway. Eventually he shrugged.
フミヤ君たちを見なかったか？
昼間にそこらで写真を撮っているのを見たけど。
そうか。見かけたら一緒にいてあげてくれ。
Make sure they don't start fucking.
それはいいけど、どうしてわざわざ？
まあ、ちょっとな。
You never know. Yuzuru was being vague, but Naori figured he was probably just concerned about Chizuru's health, one way or another. After all, it'd clearly be for the best if there was a Kuroya around in the event she ever had an episode, especially considering the fact that it seemed Nanako really hadn't come to the festival.
親父は戻るのか？
右ヒンナの川瀬さんの具合が悪くなったらしくてね。
Not Mrs. Kawase. Yuzuru was already making his way toward the staircase.
お前もあまり遅くならないうちに帰ってこいよ。
分かってるよ。
Naori watched his father leave.
どうしたの？
いや、うちのいとこがその辺にいるって話。
ああ、あの人たち。
さっきそこら辺にいたのを見たけど。ああ、ほらあそこ。
Megari pointed to a corner of the shrine grounds. Chizuru was there with her camera raised high, Fumiya following her like a shadow.
あの二人もどこか変わっていますよね。
Something's different about them. It's almost like the same difference I've seen in Ayato recently. Weird. I'm sure there's no connection there. Karen furrowed her brow.
そう。
Megari cocked her head.
なんというか怪しい感じ。そうは思いま
They
せん
look
か、
like a
兄様。
pair of fuckers, don't they?
僕にはよくわからないよ。
そういう曖昧なことをリヒトがわかるはずないだろ。
Also true.
まあ、そうですね。
Karen sighed. Chizuru approached the group, stopping dead in her tracks when she spotted Satsuki.
あら、い
どうしたんだい？
え、なんでもありません。
Chizuru shook her head.
写真を撮ってもよろしいですか？
She lifted her camera as though to illustrate her request.
別に構わないけど、みんなは？
そのくらいだったら別に。
勝手に撮ってくれてもよかったのに。
そういうわけにも参りませんから。では失礼します。
Shizuto readied her camera.
ほらさっちゃん
Sadie. I had to beckon Satsuki over.
私もよろしいのですか？
当たり前だろ。ほら
Satsuki set her hair clip into her long bangs.
私も一緒に。
Satsuki and Karen flanked Ayato.
なおちゃんも。
分かってるよ。
They all looked straight at Chizuto's camera once they were bunched up.
じゃあ撮りますね。3、2、1。ありがとうございました。
Man, I didn't get any time to actually look at that. Hold up, I didn't get any time to actually look at that. Fuck you. We're going back to the menu. I didn't get like any time to actually look at that. Oh, I can't fucking even look at the gallery. God damn it. That's right. I can't look at the gallery until I've actually finished a route in the goddamn game. Son of a bitch. I guess I'll have to scroll through it when I'm editing the video, go frame by frame and try to actually catch the photo. That sucks. I was hoping they would like pause on the photo so I could actually like take it in and see it and enjoy it. Show it in my backlog. Show me a picture in my backlog, you fuckers. I hate that you won't let me access the gallery right away. Hate that shit. Because, like, it's not like you're just going to show every CG that's already available if you just open up the gallery. Like when you unlock the gallery, it still shows that there's images locked. So if you already had a system that unlocks the photos as you see them, why does it have to be locked away? I'm just saying. I fucking hate it when games have unlockable galleries. Just let me use the fucking gallery. Asshole. Chizuto bowed after taking her photo.
このくらいだったら別に構わないさ。
これだけ暗かったらあまり映ってないような気もするけど。
もともと持っていませんし、暗い中で光らせたら迷惑ですから。
それもそうね。
Suddenly, there was a stir in the air. The previous sounds of chatter died in an instant, engendering a solemn atmosphere befitting their location.
始まるかな？
The group all looked to the stage. It was illuminated red by the light of the flames. Kensei was in a corner beating a drum, while Saya was playing a flute directly opposite him. The fringe of the screen hanging from the shrine parted, revealing Mia escorting the oracle to the stage. A demon. That was the only way to describe her. The oracle advanced to the center of the stage, her disheveled long hair framing the demon mask she donned. She slowly craned her head to the beat of the drum, almost as if glaring at every single soul that had come to watch her. Naturally, none of the villagers could see the oracle's eyes. Her demon mask was utterly devoid of any and all expression, and yet it sent chills down everyone's spines. The oracle shuffled back and forth on the stage. No one could tell if that even really was the oracle. Naori glanced at Satsuki out of the corner of his eye. He'd suspected she was the oracle. However, there she was, simply watching the ceremonial dance without so much as batting an eye. Guess I was wrong. Besides, even if the oracle on stage unmasked and revealed her face to the public, no one would know if she truly was the oracle. What little Naori could make out of her neck and hands seemed to indicate that she was a young woman. But it was dark, meaning his observations weren't necessarily accurate. The oracle held her staff aloft. Meanwhile, the timbre of the flute went up a pitch. And with that, the oracle brandished her staff, as if she were writing something in the air. Naori didn't know what symbolism that held. However, none of the adults sitting in the front of the stage took their eyes off her for even a second. Thus, he surmised that it must have meant something significant. Not that Naori had any idea how many people there actually did understand its purpose. Suddenly, the music stopped. The oracle prostrated herself at the center of the stage, remaining as still as a statue, followed shortly thereafter by the clack of wooden clappers echoing throughout the shrine grounds. Yoshimitsu left his seat and ascended to the stage. In his hands was a giant cup. He set it before the oracle. Once he was done, the oracle slowly rose to her feet. She flourished her staff back and forth as she looked into the cup. Afterwards, she produced something from her sleeve.
あれは
You abruptly broke her
知
silence.
ってるのか？
前におひなが作ってた土の人形じゃないかしら。
The oracle took the clay doll into her hands, then crushed it. Chunks of clay rained into the cup. What does it all mean? It was all probably part of some ancient ritual, but Noori still had no clue what any of it signified. The oracle grabbed her staff and swung it several times, the wooden clappers clashing loudly all the while. The oracle then bowed low before reverently holding aloft the cup as she made her way off the stage. With that, the music stopped, and conversation resumed amidst the villagers. Aito sighed.
お前が緊張してどうするんだよ。
仕方ないだろ。これだけ静まり返ってたんだから。
まあ、そうだな。
The air hadn't been so tense in all the other festivals they'd borne witness to. Back then, the adults would casually drink booze as they watched Saya dance. It was amazing what a world of difference having the real oracle around made.
これで終わりなのですか？
Fumiya suddenly chimed in with a question.
おそらくそうでしょうね。
そうですか。では僕たちは先に戻っていますね。
わかりました。
それでは千鶴。
Fumiya took Chizuta's hands into his own and escorted her off the grounds.
あの人怪我をしてたみたいね。
この前、うちで指先を切ったんだ。
Aito remained mum on the details. That said, he didn't really know how Fumiya had gotten hurt to begin with, so he simply kept quiet about how bad the injury truly was.
そうなんだ。
俺たちも石段が混む前に。
そうだね。さっちゃんは？
Saddy.
私はすぐそこですから。
Satsuki pointed to the shrine office and smiled. Okay. Oh. Uh-oh. Not the scenery tinged with red. Uh-oh. See, I knew there was going to be a big turning point at the festival. I knew that had to be the big moment, right? The group quietly proceeded down the road in the dead of night once everyone had gone to bed. It couldn't truly be called dark given the falling snow. Still, those figures blended into the shadows became part of the night itself. No one was around to question them. They glided down the road until they reached a house labeled Kawase. The group snuck inside, silently opening the door. It was just an ordinary residence, no different from the many others in the settlement. The owner of the house was asleep in her futon. She must have been in an incredibly deep sleep, considering she showed no signs of waking even with intruders surrounding her. Oh, right, because Yuzuru had gotten the call that Mrs. Kawase had been feeling under the weather, right? And there's the curse, right? But perhaps she wasn't waking up for other reasons. Incense burned within the room. The sleeve of a black robe swept it away. Yet the owner of the house remained in the depths of slumber. Suddenly, a dirk was drawn. The tip of the blade quivered. The black robe shivered from top to bottom. Hands held the weapon in reverse grip after nearly dropping it numerous times. The tip settled above the sleeping woman's abdomen. However, the hand still trembled. Another hand gripped one of the arms controlling them. The two were in conflict, the hand trying to force the blade down, the arm pushing back in an attempt to prevent the tragic outcome. The figure in the black robe shook their head, but shortly thereafter they hung it in resignation and raised the dirk. And then, a moment later, they swung down with all their might. The tip of the dirk dug right into the woman's abdomen. She moaned. Her mouth was immediately covered. The dirk was extracted from her flesh. Fresh blood spurted from the wound. The futon was painted burgundy in the blink of an eye. And before the woman could do anything, she was stabbed again. And again, and again, and again. Blood splattered everywhere, but no heed was paid as the dirt continued piercing the woman true. Her body jolted each time, until eventually she ceased moving altogether. The black-robed figure heaved deep breaths. The bloodstained victim was completely still. It seemed she was dead. However, there's still work to be done. The hand retrained its grip on the dirt and perforated the corpse right above the navel. It then carved out softening flesh around it. God. Fucking hate those. Jesus Christ, I forget how long that sound effect is. God damn. Until eventually, her abdomen was opened, gushing blood and organs. White, black, and red mixed together, forming a multicolored landscape. However, none of it could be made out very well in the darkness. Sanity would have taken its leave of the house were that not the case, though. A twisted lump of earth was set down. It was shaped much like the one the Oracle had smashed earlier at the festival. The black-robed figure seized it. They inserted the lump into the deceased woman's abdomen. In just mere moments, the clawed surface was tarnished with crimson blood. All entrails in the way were pulled out and ripped apart. The floor was sullied with filth akin to the residue of a macabre geyser of gore. The work immediately stopped. A foul odor spread through the residence. The stench was nauseating, eliciting tears in its wake. Perhaps it was the situation itself that brought forth those tears. Regardless, this task had to be seen through to the end, for that was the fate she'd been saddled with. Ah. Ah. Okay. Nanako strolled the streets of the settlement all by herself. The sun's face was peeking out from behind the ridges of the eastern mountain range, but its presence did nothing to abate the stark bite of this frigid winter morning. Yeah, okay. I've been thinking, like, that's why Satsuki couldn't hang out with him after the festival, because she had plans after the festival, right? Okay. Nanako's warm body was chilled to the bone in no time flat. She hugged herself for heat as she exhaled white steam. In hindsight, she wished she'd worn something heftier. But alas, it was far too late to cry over spilled milk. Still, that didn't change the fact that she wanted to get into a different outfit as soon as possible. A bizarre stench carried on a cold, stale breeze stung Nanako's nose. Wait, so this is the next morning. Oh. Okay. Okay. So Yuzuru was in on it, the doctor, right? He said that Mrs. Kawase had been feeling under the weather, right? I'm guessing he's the one that, like, I'm guessing gave her some kind of medicine, right? To knock her out. And then lit the incense to try to cover up the stench of what was going to happen. Okay, so he was in on it. And he knocked her out. And then the rest of the higher-ups did what they had to do. Along with Satsuki. Gotcha. Okay. The air was chilly enough to numb her sense of smell, and yet that scent still struck her dumb. It was the reek of excretia.
何かしら
Nanako covered her mouth and nose and scanned the area. The outskirts of the settlement were littered with numerous residences. One of them was a small house right along the path of the wind. It seemed the miasma was coming from around there.
あそこは
A woman named Sachiko Kawase lived there, if Nanako's memory served her right. She was a widow who'd lived alone ever since her husband had passed away. Furthermore, she'd been in poor health since the start of the year, turning her into a frequent visitor of the Kuroya clinic. I hope everything's alright in there. And that's where Yuzuru comes into play, huh? Because, as Nanako just mentioned, she's been in poor health, so when they select their sacrifice, they don't select, like, someone young who's still healthy, who can still contribute to the village. They pick someone older who's on the last legs of their life and look at it. I'm guessing they view it anyway as more so of a mercy killing.
川瀬さん
Uh-oh. Nanako hailed the older woman from outside the house. Her heart pounded as her insides coiled like a spring. No surprise there. After all, not only had the stench grown ranker, but she couldn't tell what was going on inside. Thus, it was nervously that Nanako grabbed the doorknob. It offered no resistance, since the villagers were not in the habit of locking their homes. The reek intensified the moment Nanako opened the door. Whatever Fetter? Fetter. Okay, I gotta look that one up. Fetter? Strong but foul smell.
Feeder.
Feeder. Don't call it feeder. That's weird. Anyway. Whatever feeder plagued the air was clearly out of the ordinary. Alright, gotta click back into the game, damn it. For a moment, Nanako contemplated turning back, seeing as she still had the option open to her. But as a nurse, it was her duty to determine why a human body was producing such a foul stench. Still, that didn't stop her knees from shaking. Regardless, she mustered her courage, set her hand against the wall, and inched forward through the dark room.
Kawase-san.
Nanako slid open the door, separating the entryway from the living room. Air pregnant with decay surged forward. There was no denying it now. Nanako knew precisely what this rancid odor was. Every instinct of hers was screaming to run away. However, since she'd come this far, she had an obligation to see it through to the end. Just then, something white fluttered right past her face. It was a moth. A male winter moth with snow-white wings had flown into the room. Undeterred by Nanako's shriek, it flapped right on over to... a silhouette situated by the wall. The moth perched on its face before entering its mouth. The figure's lips quivered. Nanako drew back the moment she realized exactly what it was. A giant mass hanging from the wall. The floor painted liberally with blood. Chunks of meat scattered every which direction. Nanako inched backward. She couldn't possibly have brought herself to take another step closer. She looked away. Though she'd only caught a glimpse of it, that thing was unmistakably Sachiko Kawase's corpse. Sour bile stung her throat. Nausea built up like a geyser. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore and scrabbled outside, voiding the contents of her stomach. Her eyes burned with tears. It took everything in her power not to simply collapse on the spot. I have to do something. But what? What am I supposed to do here? Though she should have known the appropriate course of action, her mind was in shambles at the moment. I'm so thirsty. Nanako stumbled her way over to the Kuroya clinic and immediately downed a glass of water. The frigid liquid brought her back to her senses. Thanks to that, she remembered what she needed to do. Nanako grabbed the phone, seated in the corner of the living room. Nanako frantically flipped through the phone book. Eventually, she found the number for the Toyama Prefectural Police and dialed it. Calling them would have been a lot harder if the phones used manual switchboards, but fortunately, automatic switchboards had been implemented early in Hitagata thanks to Hinagami Pharmaceuticals' influence. Nanako tapped her foot, clearly impatient. Even the ringing of the phone was grating on her ears, as if each decibel strung out every moment tenfold. Nanako hung up and slumped into a nearby chair. She'd been so tense that she couldn't so much as move a muscle now that she'd finally had a minute to breathe. The door to the examination room opened, revealing Yuzuru.
事件がどうとか聞こえていたが
Nanako went on to describe what she'd seen at the Kawase residence.
川瀬さんが釣られた状態で
It's the curse. Yuzuru briefly unfurrowed his brow in contemplation.
沢城君は神社に行って知らせてきてくれないか
神社
人型の偉い人間には伝えておかなければならないだろう
わかりました
Nanako grabbed the edges of the table and rose to her feet. Though her knees were wobbling, she knew she was better off moving than staying put. She needed to do something, anything, to keep her mind off the terror she just witnessed.
では行ってきます
ああすまない
Remnants of the festival still littered the shrine grounds.
おや、沢城さん。
Nanako found Kensei cleaning up.
ケンセイさん右ヒンナに住んでる川瀬さんがその
Kensei blanched.
警察にも連絡してゆずる先生に仕草の方たちにも
そうですか。警察は何と？
近くの集落に 捜査課の刑事さんがいらっしゃるようですぐに向かわせるとおっしゃっていました。
わかりました。おそらく駐在の高山さんにも連絡が行っているでしょうから。
何が起こったのか。
そうですね。
Kensei hung his head, looking rather forlorn. Nanako went back down the way she came when she was done, explaining. Far too much had happened since the previous night, but though she was positively exhausted, she didn't feel like eating or sleeping. Nanako returned to the Kuroya clinic. She sank into a chair before resting her arms and head on the table. She felt disgusting. For a moment, she considered asking for the day off, only to quickly realize that was out of the question. And after the police said they might have questions for her, given how she was the one who'd found the body.
あれナナコ、今日は早いんだ。
Now they strolled into the living room.
親父も何か慌ただしく出て行ったけど。
よくわからない。
All Nanako do was weakly shake her head. Aw, poor Nanako. Bunji Inui of the Toyama Police Department stared up from Mai Hin'na at the shrine of the mountain. Alright. He snorted and took off. Over a decade's worth of waiting had finally borne fruit. Inui always came up with some flimsy excuse for her to stay near Hitogata whenever this time of year came around. And it stood as a testament to how long he'd been waiting. For the curse to strike the settlement. Inui entered the police station, situated just a few steps away from the entrance to the settlement. A lone officer awaited Inui, curiously scrutinizing his arrival.
どちらさんですか？県警の乾だ。お待ちしておりました。自分はこの駐在所勤務の高山巡査であります。
Takayama instantly stood at attention and saluted.
現状は？右Hin'naと呼ばれる地区であります。そのようなことは聞いていない。そうか。
Inui was of no inclination to question or criticize him. He'd already known for a while that the settlement only had a single officer. All he could do was pray no one had tampered with the scene or destroyed any evidence.
案内してくれ。
Takayama clicked his heels and saluted like a model soldier. Inui followed Takayama through snowy roads until a house surrounded by a crowd came into view.
野じ馬を散らしてくれ。了解しました。
Takayama raced over to the villagers. The throng of this size would make it impossible to find any footprints in the area, not that Inui had ever held hope he'd be so lucky. He approached the house with a parted sea of people. The nameplate to the side of the entrance said Kawase.
県警の方ですか？
A man emerged from within.
刑事課の乾だ。そちらは？
医師の黒谷譲です。現場は保全しておりますので。
Yuzuru. Have I heard that name before? Right, of course. He was Hideyomi Hinagami's youngest son.
何も触れていませんな。
ええ、もちろんです。
Though he didn't fully trust Yuzuru, Inui nodded and marched directly into the crime scene.
これは。
Inui was rendered speechless by the sight before him. Hanging above a vast ocean of blood was a most grisly corpse. Inui could tell from a glance that there was probably no doctor on Earth who could have done anything for the poor woman.
写真を撮ってくれ。
Pale-faced Takayama retrieved a camera from a cloth bag he'd brought with him. His distress was quite understandable. Even police officers rarely saw corpses quite so gruesome. Blinding flashes temporarily lit the room. The red pervading the crime scene from top to bottom gleamed brighter each time.
先生は見ましたかな？
Inui turned to Yuzuru.
外からわかることはざっと調べました。
Takayama procured his flashlight and illuminated the corpse's abdomen. The darkened blood barely reflected any light, likely because it had long since dried.
縫われているな。
Some traces suggested the area from the navel to the genitals had been sliced open and stitched shut with thick thread more akin to string, greatly resembling the aftermath of a C-section.
先生は十数年前の事件を覚えていますな。
Yuzuru nodded.
あの時もこのように遺体が吊り下げられて腹が縫われていた。
Hin'na様のたたり。
Yuzuru's question came out as little more than a sigh.
写真撮影終わりました。
Takayama issued his report, face still blanched.
君、刃物は持っているか？
ハサミでした。
The young officer produced sewing scissors from his bag.
まだ取るものはあるから準備をしておくように。
Inui approached the corpse. Then he pressed the edges of the scissors against the thread, stitching up the abdomen. However, the blood had hardened around the stitches, making his work rather tricky. Thus, Inui had to pry with the scissors until he could finally cut through it. It's only after he'd severed the thread in multiple spots that it happened. Something stirred within the victim's abdomen. Inui immediately cupped his hands below her genitals. Right then, a red lump fell out of the reopened wound with a visceral squelch. Takayama shrilly shrieked. Inui scowled and snorted after catching the object.
同じだな。
The blood-stained clay doll now lay atop his hands.
前の殺しでも同じようなことがあった。あの時は知らずに落として壊してしまったが。
Inui set the clay doll on the nearby futon. A wave of red immediately radiated across the cloth. That said, there wasn't much to ruin, considering pretty much the whole thing was already blood-stained as it stood.
写真を撮っておくように。
Inui issued a fear-stricken Takayama's orders before continuing to inspect the body.
出血の量から見て、ここで殺害されたことは間違いあるまい。
Inui wrote in his notebook as he pontificated.
釣った後で腹を縫うとは考えにくい。縛られた手首のうっ血具合からは、死後すぐに縛って釣られたと考えられる。すなわち遺体への工作は極めて素早く行われている。
自分は法医学を学んだことはないので
Yuzuru shook his head. Inui grabbed one of the corpse's willowy legs. Barely budged, meaning her joints had probably locked up from rigor mortis.
陶器であることを考慮しても12時間ほどというところか。
昨日の深夜に殺害されたということですか？
Yuzuru checked his pocket watch.
昨日は祭りだったそうだが、この人を見かけた者は？
It was only then, after Inui inquired with Takayama, that the inspector realized he hadn't even asked about the victim's name.
はい。川瀬幸子さんはお祭りには現れていないようです。
何か？
昨日の夜に私が彼女の診察をしています。
それは迂闊でしたな。
私を疑っているのですね。
それが仕事ですからな。
Inui turned his back on Yuzuru and the latter refused to say another word.
どのような薬を処方したのかを。
Inui left it at that. It didn't mean his suspicions surrounding Yuzuru were cleared, of course.
腹部の思想の形状から見て、凶器は片刃の担当。ヤクザ者が使うドスだろうな。
そうですか。
Yuzuru wasn't fazed by Inui's sarcasm.
その辺りに散らばっている臓物も同じもので切断したのだろ
う。前回もそうだったのですか？
そうだ。
Inui's reply was curt.
君、外の連中に聞き込みをしてきてくれ。
はい。
Takayama immediately rushed outside.
これだけの出血では犯人も返り血を浴びているだろうな。
そうでしょうね。でも外に目立った血痕はありませんでした。
誰かが意図的に隠したのでなければそうでしょうな。
Though Inui knew Yuzuru's theory was probably correct, still can't help but throw that out there.
まさか。
聞き込みに行かせたが、有用な情報が集まるとは思えません。
Yuzuru's attitude was admirable, to say the least.
確か先生はひな神の次男坊でしたな。
ええ。だからこそ余計に。
疑えるものは全て疑うのが仕事です。
Inui departed the crime scene.
夕方には麓から鑑識などが到着します。それまでは誰も立ち入れないように。
分かっています。
第一発見者は先生ですかな？
いえ、うちで働いている看護婦です。
後で駐在所へ来るようにと伝えてください。
わかりました。
Inui shut the door to the Kawase residence and cordoned it off with police rope. He then scanned the surrounding ground that had been ravaged by the onlookers' footprints. There was no blood to be found, just as Yuzuru had said. However, it didn't look like anyone had been trying to cover up any either. Inui shoveled the snow around the entryway but found not so much as a single speck of red. There was no blood anywhere around the door, inside or out, meaning the culprit had likely changed clothes indoors so as not to leave a blood trail. The fact they had a change of clothes on hand indicated the crime had been carefully orchestrated. It would have all added up if it truly had been the work of the curse of Lord Hin'na. But Inui didn't believe in any curse. No, he was convinced it was simply a killer trying to pass their murders off using a local superstition. Well, yeah.
失礼します。
Nanako opened the door to the police station and trudged on inside. Middle-aged man she'd never seen before glared at her.
県警の乾です。第一発見者の沢城さんですね。
はい。
どうぞそこへおかけになってください。
Inui pointed at a stool near the heater.
失礼します。
Nanako sat as prompted.
早速お尋ねしますが、
はい。今朝早くに川瀬さんの家の前を通りかかった際、一瞬に気づきました。
足跡などはありましたか？
足跡。
Nanako thought back to that morning. Let's see, I walked down the road, noticed the smell, headed for Mrs. Kawase's house.
よくわかりません。雪は降っていません。
雪の上に血痕などは
なかったと思います。暗くても雪の上だったら。
玄関の鍵は
かかっていませんでした。この辺りでは施錠している家の方が。
私はいつも鍵をかけているが。
Inui eyed Nanako like a snake sizing up its prey. Does he suspect me? Nanako gulped.
そうして中に入って遺体を発見した。なぜこの駐在所に来るのではなく、
駐在所よりも私が勤めている病院の方が近かったので、それに。
なるほど。
Inui nodded and flipped through his notebook.
被害者は昨日黒谷医院で診療を受けていたそうですが。
知りませんでした。昨日は。
おお、祭りに関わることですかな。
父の手伝いです。
That was the only answer she could give.
なるほど。大変そうですな。
Inui scribbled something in his notebook as if he couldn't have cared less.
そうなると、今朝早く川瀬さんの家の前を通りがかったのも。
はい。遅くなってしまって。
Nanako's hands clenched into fists atop her lap.
そうですか。
However, Inui produced a dark lump out of a box next to him, paying Nanako's behavior no heed.
これが何かわかりますか？
Nanako cocked her head and inspected it closely. The object was shaped like a crescent moon. What's more, there were several bumps protruding out of it, but she had no idea what purpose they served.
すみません。わかりません。
昔この集落で起こったたたりをご存知ですか？
話に聞いたことは。でも最後にたたりにあったというのも。
Nanako's eyes widened in realization. She mulled over the peculiar way in which Sachiko Kawase had been murdered. The lump sitting right in front of her, and what Inui had just said.
刑事さん、これはヒンナ様のたたりな。
そう呼ばれている事件の一つでしょうな。
Then, that means what I'm looking at is.
これはヒンナ様。
私は以前の事件以来、このことについて調べていましてね。
The real Lord Hin'na was indeed enshrined reverently in the Hinagami estate. Legends had it that those who prayed to him would have their wishes granted. However, said legends also proclaimed disaster would strike those who worshipped him improperly, by worshipping a false Lord Hin'na, in other words. Nanako had been raised on those stories ever since she was a child. That said, she didn't know how reliable they were. In fact, up until this point, she believed the curse had absolutely no basis in reality. But now that she'd seen this for herself,
今日はもう結構です。
Inui abruptly ended the interrogation there.
はい。
後日またお話を伺うこともあるかもしれませんので。
はい。わかりました。
Nanako rose to her feet. Does he suspect me? She'd heard that the first one to find the body was the prime suspect in most similar cases. Thus, there was a very real possibility she'd be investigated. Leaden clouds of gloom shrouded Nanako's heart as she exited the police station. Takayama returned right after Nanako left.
乾刑事。
警部補だ。
はあ、失礼しました。乾警部補殿。
そんなことはどうでもいい。証言は集まったのか？
それが。
Takayama's face dropped.
聞き出せなかったか？
申し訳ありません。
Takayama bowed to Inui.
ある程度のことは分かっている。どうせ皆たたりがどうのと言ってろくに話もできなかったのだろ
う。その通りです。
Inui had been through this whole routine before. He knew the people of Hitogata would simply chalk incidents like this up to the curse of Lord Hin'na and pay them no further mind. It was what made rounding up information so difficult. Furthermore, Hitogata was a small settlement, so once something unusual occurred, the whole populace would know about it in no time. After all, while anyone could start a rumor, no one could stop one.
出てくる。
Inui rose to his feet.
どちらへ？
ひながみ家に行って話を聞いてくる。君は現状が荒らされないように見張っていろ。
は、了解いたします。
Inui left the station, figuring those sorts of tasks were all that the young officer was good for. The settlement was practically deserted. Very few people were outside. Those that were simply observed Inui from a distance. However, he didn't bat so much as an eyelid at their cold reception. Most tiny mountain communities had always been this way. They worked themselves to the bone to purge any outsiders who dared infringe on their land. Inui likely would have been stoned to death had this been the era of bandits centuries ago. For such an act would equate to the village's safety, violent though it may have been. Perhaps this place was the same. Maybe they'd snuff out a single police inspector like it was nothing, all in the name of protecting the settlement, and protecting Lord Hin'na's secrets. Then again, the prefectural police would likely raise hell and immediately turn the village inside out looking for him if such a thing happened. Not because Inui himself was all that important, but as a means of saving face. After all, a crime like that would have been considered a blow to the reputation of the nation itself, and no slander on Japan's name would be allowed in this era. The time sure are stifling, eh? Not that he could ever say that out loud, of course. Inui knew where the Hinagami estate was. He'd been there before, after all. Not only was it close to the heart of Hitogata, it was also the largest building in the entire settlement, minus the shrine. Unsurprising, considering it was home to the most powerful men and women of Hitogata.
失礼。
Inui addressed a girl who was sweeping the snow near the front door.
はい、どちら様でしょうか。
富山県警察部の乾です。
少々お待ちくださいませ。
The girl bowed and made her way into the house. If Inui had to guess, she was a young member of the family. Last time he'd been here, the family had infant twins, and she would have been just about the right age. The girl returned shortly thereafter.
お待たせいたしました。大奥様がお待ちですので、中へどうぞ。
That term of reverence indicated she was a servant, not the family's daughter as Inui had first surmised.
では失礼。
Inui found himself in the Hinagami's spacious living room. A charcoal fire was kindling in the hearth, warming in the air. Inui seated himself in one of the floor cushions bordering the table. The door slid open, revealing an elderly woman, Mariko Hinagami.
お久しぶりです。
Inui bowed to her.
警察の方ですか。はじめまして。
Mariko sat at the head of the table, not indicating whether she truly didn't remember him or was simply playing the fool.
ご当主はいらっしゃらないのですか。
私がお話を受けたまわります。
Mariko answered with the dignity of a judge presiding over a court of law. This means they don't plan on giving anything away. That was Inui's read of the situation, at least.
今朝方起こった件はご存知ですね。
もちろんです。
Mariko nodded. Naturally. There was no way she wouldn't know what was happening in the settlement, especially if it pertained to the curse.
感想をお聞かせ願えませんかな。
感想ですか。
Mariko raised an eyebrow ever so slightly, her countenance perplexed.
痛ましい事件が起こったことについては。
それだけです。
他に何か。
いえね、ヒンナ様のたたりと言われていることもご存知なのではないかと。
ただの噂話でしょう。
では、今回の件にヒンナ様は関係ないと？
当然です。私たちはたたりを起こさせないために祭りを行っているのですから。
Oh, I'm sure. Mariko's resolute attitude did not falter.
しかし事実、祭りの翌日に事件が起こった。これについてはどうお考えで？
関係のないことです。
Mariko's tone broke no argument.
昔から祭りの後に事件が起こっていたようですから、それに便乗した事件と考えることもできますがね。
よく調べておいでですね。
これでも刑事ですからな。前回起こった事件も確か祭りの直後でした。
そうでしたかね。
Mariko's playing dumb for certain this time.
昨日の祭り、巫女が神楽を奉納したそうですね。
ええ、よくご存知で。
ヒンナ様の託戦は出たのですかな。
さあ、私などが預かり知らぬことですから。
Once again, Inui was left unsure whether she was being sincere or lying through her teeth. Whatever the case, she was clearly keeping her cards close to her chest and had no intention of changing that.
ではそうしますかな。
Inui rose to his feet. Just then the door slid open, and the servant from before popped in with teacups set atop a round tray.
お茶をお持ちしたのですが。
結構。それでは失礼。
Inui strolled past the servant and took his leave.